Question and answer period. We've received a couple of questions. I'm going to respond via a video response, and then that way others can enjoy the benefits of knowing the questions and the answers to the questions. So if somebody's interested in knowing where there's a low chance of the population allowing their government to make the changes that we're seeing in Canada, regarding taxation, the money used, the fraud, the control of what people can buy, forcing the green agenda, forcing the transgender and other woke agendas, forcing the globalist agenda, over-regulation of farming and food, etc. This individual is fine with a poor country, but not necessarily fine with high crime, where she couldn't commingle with the population, and she doesn't necessarily want to have to live in a segregated expat community. She's willing to learn another language, and she's looking for some insight as to where some people are going and why. She's not ready to retire, but she is willing to change what she does for a living. She's interested in raising some of her own food responsibly and becoming a farmer to some extent. And so a little bit of feedback to these questions, and maybe we'll just start with the map actually of the world, and we'll overlay the map on top of this, and I'll just provide a little bit of brief, like Cliff's Notes summary, hopefully in a minute or two, as to why we've sort of focused on the areas that we focused on. So I guess, some of these societal issues that we've had over the last 5 years, there's been some, potentially resistant pockets. So we know some leaders, for example, some global world leaders that have not been participating, have had mystery arrest problems. We've also seen mystery death things with some of these countries that were resistant a little bit to the agenda. So it's hard to say whether or not any place is safe. Additionally, of course, I can't predict anything. That would be ludicrous. But I do have some reasonable experience to make some reasonable, educated, informed decisions based on some simple enough concepts. And then, of course, we also have historic cycles. Additionally, I like to use the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, and Occam's razor, I believe, is the most simple solution, is probably the right answer. So same thing, this can be applied here. And so back to the overlay of the map here, and who cares whether it's round or flat, separate discussion. So some areas of interest near Australia, Vanuatu represents some potential opportunity, but it's got a handful of cons as well. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and I believe that you never actually really own the land, but they're certainly advertising and promoting themselves as a good retirement destination or a good relocation destination with a handful of tax perks. But again, it's always about pros and cons. Philippines, I think, represents some decent enough opportunity. It's hard to say whether or not they're going to wind up changing in any conflict. I doubt it. They're a relatively enough Christian nation. They've got a good mix of culture of Filipino, English, Spanish, and it makes them relatively balanced. There's certainly lots of islands in that area, and lots of area, like privacy for the most part. So if you're willing to live simply, the problem is foreign land ownership is complicated. Foreign land ownership of good property is sort of complicated. And then, of course, you've got the weather to contend with. And I would also suggest that internet, but again, Starlink is a new, good solution for that. Some other places that they mention, Malta, Cyprus, and hopefully we'll highlight those on the map as we're looking at it. Greece potentially, Portugal potentially, but again, Poland, I suppose, Hungary, heck, Russia even. It really depends on what you're after and how much you're able to leave with and how much bureaucracy you're going to go with, right? I mean, some people may agree and say, well, Russia's the enemy, but there's a lot of people that are leaving Canada to go to Russia also. And they do play in a different financial system, so there's some elements of money exchange there that's a little bit more complicated. Poland is certainly not subject to some of these same philosophies because they've learned from history, and so there's a lot of people moving there. However, they're still at the center of a conflict zone. I know people that are leaving South Africa. They're not necessarily thrilled there. I mean, could you make it work in South Africa? Maybe, but it's probably not the top of my list, or it's typically not the top of anybody's list for the most part. In the Caribbean, there's some islands. Dominican Republic is a popular choice and a good choice. I would certainly put it in the probably top 5 or top 10. Again, not a country that's totally fucked in the head, relatively left alone. They don't seem to be as affected by weather and geography and things like Haiti right next door. There's some other islands in the Caribbean that offer some pros and cons. St. Kitts, Barbados. I mean, I've even heard of people returning to Trinidad. They maybe emigrated from Trinidad to Canada and went back to Trinidad in order to make money, in order to save up and buy a house and participate in the market or something. And then, of course, we also have Central America and South America, which has typically been a relatively safe haven over the last 100 years. And within here, of course, we have some different areas that may offer pros and cons. A lot of people also like Mexico. A lot of people like the States. A lot of people like Hawaii. There's pros and cons to an assortment of states. There's pros and cons to Mexico. For me and for us, I don't necessarily think they offer the best pros and cons. I like the keep it simple, stupid method, as I mentioned, and just simplifying, right? So less people, less problems. Less population, less problems. And less pharma interest also, because there's less people and there's less profit. I also like the idea of countries that are wanting to participate in a global economy with global human resources. And so Uruguay and Paraguay, for example, do not tax on foreign income or foreign earned income. And, if you're able to leave with 200 grand, 500 grand, and transfer over there with your family and buy a house and start up a small business, you've got yourself a great life. And especially if you've got some sort of other, maybe clients that you can continue to keep in Canada or in the States, or grow some sort of new remote business or grow a business there. But you've definitely got, probably more options and better options, and the food is more affordable, it's more nutritious. Generally speaking, you don't hear too many people regretting going down that direction at the moment. I mean, on that note, of course, history is cyclical. So, Argentina, there's certainly people that are interested in going to Argentina, and it's a large country, certainly represents probably lots of opportunity. They're at a different stage in the cycle. Venezuela's at a different stage in the cycle. Colombia, these countries have some conflict or have had conflict, so they represent risk, but frequently where there's risk, there's reward. But you also don't know how it's going to play out. Nicaragua, same thing. A lot of people are happy in Nicaragua, but yet on the other hand, it's not necessarily what you would think of as your top choice. But if you really start to understand their culture and their mentality and American government interference in some of these regions over the years, with your pros and cons, it could be a fit for you, right? Ecuador, another great choice. Higher population density than something like Uruguay, for example, because I believe it's quadruple the population in Ecuador for comparative land mass. And so that's a brief introduction as to some areas that might be, like just general overview. But so my short list, and it is personally for my recommendations, and I think it works well for people in Canada, is to stay in the same time zone and just go somewhere where you're spending less in energy, less in food. And sorry if I'm sort of up towards the camera there. I was just sort of getting a little closer to the tablet here that I had set up. And let me go back to the other questions here, to go back to the questions, see if we've sort of answered that. So yeah, if you wanted to be a farmer, for example, in Uruguay, there's wonderful property opportunities there. We have some listings in Uruguay and in Colombia and in Panama and in Costa Rica. We have a network of professionals that we work with in the real estate market, accounting, legal, medical services, health services, and part of the idea is to have this network that we're building together and sharing together to mutually benefit together. And let me see if that sort of has answered most of the questions. Regarding strategy, I personally, and I've got some of my own complications for access to money as a separate subject, but I personally think that the most secure things are probably going to be real estate in a secure country and a secure place, So Panama has pretty decent property laws. Oh, and I forgot to mention UAE. A lot of people pick UAE, but too hot for me. And so, anyways, didn't mean to jump off subject there, but and overlook UAE. But we've got these complicated land claims in BC and Ontario that are starting. That's not going to go away. That's going to get worse. It's going to drive down property values. It's going to change dynamics. And you don't have to deal with this stuff in certain places because they've got different laws over what their property laws look like. And they're just in a different part of the cycle, right? Every empire implodes. But in addition to real estate, gold is probably an intelligent choice. If you want to not participate in the system, I think what's probably going to make the most sense is once you've settled on your good country, probably to start up a trust and then to be sort of a ward of your trust, I imagine. And your trust hopefully will not need a digital ID because it is a different type of entity. And if you're living on your own private paid off property in a remote country, in a relatively remote area, farming, fishing, hunting, because that's allowed, and you've got some sort of, financial system to back you, and you're also participating in the local market via exchange, barter, cash, gold, whatever, it's probably a reasonably enough secure place to be. But again, hard to forecast where things are going to go, and these are just sort of my own thoughts and my own directions that I want to be leaning towards. I also love Colombia. Great food, and it certainly represents some great opportunity, but we'll have to see what happens there over the next 6 months to a year. Yeah, so let me see if I've answered the questions or not. Give me a sec here, and let me see my notes here. I think that's probably good enough to answer your questions and answer some other people's questions, and we'll see you on the next one. Escape Canada, I guess.